There is a war happening inside you right now. It is not a war between you and your enemies. It is not a war between you and the world. It is the oldest, quietest, most consequential war a human being can fight. And it plays out in the 3 seconds between when your alarm goes off and when you decide whether to get up. Most people lose that war before breakfast. They lose it before they open their laptop, before they sit down to write the first sentence, before they make the phone call they have been dreading. They lose it in the hesitation. They lose it in the feeling, that cold, heavy, irrational feeling that says, not yet, not today, maybe tomorrow. And the cruelest part? The feeling is lying. It always is. This audiobook exists for one reason: to hand you the weapons to win that war. Not the motivational kind of weapons that wear off by Thursday, but the kind that rewire how you relate to difficulty itself. The kind that over time make hard things feel not just doable, but inevitable. We will not waste your time with cheerleading. You do not need someone to tell you that you are capable. You already know you are capable. What you need is a system, a precise, honest, practical system for closing the gap between what you know you should do and what you actually do. That gap has a name. It is called resistance. And understanding it is where everything starts. Over the next 90 minutes, we are going to walk through 10 chapters. Each chapter builds on the last. Each one gives you something you can use before this audio ends. By the time you finish, you will have a complete operating framework, a personal protocol for forcing yourself through difficulty, not once, but as a permanent way of living. Let us begin. 1. Understanding resistance. Know your real enemy. Before you can defeat something, you must understand exactly what it is. Resistance is the force that shows up every time you attempt to move from a lower level of functioning to a higher one. It appears when you try to start a business, finish a project, repair a relationship, get fit, learn a skill, create something meaningful, or simply do the work you know you need to do. It is universal. Every person who has ever attempted to grow has felt it. But here is what most people misunderstand about resistance. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is not a character flaw. Resistance is a biological response, a protective mechanism built into your nervous system that triggers whenever your brain perceives change as a threat. From an evolutionary standpoint, the unknown was dangerous. Novelty cost energy. Risk meant death. So your brain evolved to push back against anything unfamiliar, anything uncomfortable, anything that required more than you currently give. The problem is that you no longer live in that world. The threat your brain is responding to is not a predator. It is a blank document, an unread email, a gym bag sitting by the door. And yet the physical sensation of resistance, the anxiety, the avoidance, the sudden exhaustion, is just as real as if the danger were life-threatening. Resistance has a signature. Learning to recognize resistance in its various disguises is one of the most powerful skills you can develop. Resistance rarely announces itself as fear. Instead, it arrives wearing costumes. It shows up as procrastination, the sudden urge to check your phone, clean the kitchen, or reorganize your desk right before you sit down to do something important. It shows up as rationalization, the perfectly logical-sounding reasons why today is not the right day. You need more information. The timing is off. You will start next month when things settle down. It shows up as perfectionism, the insistence that conditions must be ideal before you begin, which ensures you never begin at all. And most dangerously, it shows up as busyness, filling every hour with activity that feels productive, but carefully avoids the one thing that actually matters. The rule of inverse importance. Here is a rule you can apply immediately. The amount of resistance you feel toward a task is directly proportional to how important that task is to your growth. Think about that. The things that feel hardest to start, the creative project, the difficult conversation, the new discipline, are precisely the things with the highest value. Resistance is not a sign that you should stop. It is a flare gun marking the exact location of your most important work. When you feel the pull to avoid something, your new reflex is not retreat. Your new reflex is curiosity. You ask, what is this task asking of me that I am afraid to give? The answer to that question is always the beginning of growth. Practical step. Map your resistance. Tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 things you have been avoiding. Not things you cannot do, things you have been choosing not to do. Next to each one, write a single, honest sentence about what you are afraid will happen if you do it. Not what might go wrong, what you are actually afraid of. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discovering you are not as capable as you want to believe. This exercise is not about self-criticism. It is about introducing light into a dark room. Resistance operates on ambiguity. The moment you name it precisely, it loses a significant portion of its power over you. 2. Building a forcing function. Structure as liberation. Willpower is a resource, and like all resources, it depletes. This is not a metaphor. Cognitive scientists call it decision fatigue, the measurable decline in the quality of your choices and your capacity for self-control as the day progresses and your mental energy is spent. Every decision you make, what to eat, what to wear, what to reply, which task to tackle next, draws from the same pool. By the time you sit down to do your most important work after a day of small decisions, that pool is often dry. This is why relying on motivation or willpower to do hard things is a losing strategy. You cannot win a war by hoping to feel like fighting. You win by removing the need to make the choice at all. A forcing function is a structure, environment, rule, or commitment that removes the option of not doing the hard thing. When you build forcing functions into your life, you stop depending on your mood because the decision was already made. The first type is the commitment device. This is a choice you make in advance that binds your future self to a specific behavior. Paying for a gym class you will lose money on if you skip, telling 5 people about the project you are starting, scheduling a meeting with your collaborator even before you feel ready. The discomfort of breaking a public commitment is often stronger than the discomfort of doing the hard thing. The second type is environmental design. Your environment is constantly giving you instructions. A phone on your desk says, check me. A book on your nightstand says, read me. A gym bag already packed and sitting at the front door says, take me. Designing your physical environment to make the right behavior the default and the wrong behavior require more effort is one of the highest leverage changes you can make. The third type is time blocking with accountability. Rather than keeping a to-do list, which allows your brain to negotiate endlessly about when each item gets done, block specific hours in your calendar for specific tasks. Then add an accountability layer. Tell someone when you will do it and report back when you have. The simple act of reporting to another person activates a completely different set of social motivations that run deeper than personal willpower. The fourth type is the implementation intention. Decades of psychological research show that people who plan the precise when, where, and how of a behavior are dramatically more likely to follow through than those who simply intend to do it. Instead of saying, I will exercise more, you say, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m., I will put on my shoes and begin my workout in the living room before I check my phone. The specificity is not pedantic, it is neurologically powerful. Practical step. Design your forcing functions this week. Choose one hard thing you have been avoiding. Then build at least 2 forcing functions around it. Make a commitment to someone else. Schedule the exact time block. Set up your physical environment so the first action requires almost no decision. The laptop is already open on the right document. The running shoes are already by the door. The phone is already in the other room. You are not trying to make yourself feel like doing it. You are making it structurally easier to do it than to avoid it. That is a completely different game, and one you can actually win. Chapter 3. The 2-minute rule and the physics of beginning. There is a law of physics that applies perfectly to human behavior. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects in motion tend to stay in motion. The hardest part of doing any difficult thing is almost never the middle. It is almost never the sustained effort, the long climb, the deep work. The hardest part, by an enormous margin, is the first 2 minutes, the moment you sit down and begin. Because beginning requires overcoming inertia, and inertia is the primary mechanism through which resistance maintains its grip. Once you are in motion, truly in motion, hands on keyboard, pen on paper, feet on pavement, something shifts. Your brain chemistry changes. The anxiety fades. The task, which felt overwhelming from a distance, reveals itself as manageable up close. You are not trying to make yourself feel like doing it. You are making it structurally easier to do it than to avoid it. That is a completely different game, and one you can actually win. Chapter 3. The 2-minute rule and the physics of beginning. There is a law of physics that applies perfectly to human behavior. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest, and objects in motion tend to stay in motion. The hardest part of doing any difficult thing is almost never the middle. It is almost never the sustained effort, the long climb, the deep work. The hardest part, by an enormous margin, is the first 2 minutes. The moment you sit down and begin. Because beginning requires overcoming inertia, and inertia is the primary mechanism through which resistance maintains its grip. Once you are in motion, truly in motion, hands on keyboard, pen on paper, feet on pavement, something shifts. Your brain chemistry changes. The anxiety fades. The task, which felt overwhelming from a distance, reveals itself as manageable up close.
The monster under the bed is never as large as it appeared in the dark. This insight leads directly to one of the simplest and most effective strategies in this book: reduce the activation energy of starting to almost zero. How to apply the 2-minute rule? The 2-minute rule works like this. If beginning a task takes 2 minutes or less, do it immediately. Do not schedule it, do not add it to a list, do not think about it. Do it now. This clears cognitive clutter and prevents the accumulation of small avoidances that, over time, create the psychological weight of being perpetually behind. But the more powerful application of this principle is this. For large, intimidating tasks, commit only to doing 2 minutes of them. Not the whole project, not a session. 2 minutes. You will write for 2 minutes. You will work on the report for 2 minutes. You will make 1 phone call.
What happens in the vast majority of cases is that after 2 minutes, you are already in motion. Momentum has replaced inertia. You continue not because you forced yourself, but because stopping now would require its own effort. You have used physics against resistance. The gateway habit. Related to the physics of beginning is the concept of the gateway habit, a tiny, almost trivially easy behavior that reliably leads to a larger one. For a writer, it might be opening the document and reading the last paragraph they wrote. For an athlete, it might be putting on workout clothes. For an entrepreneur, it might be opening their business plan and reading the first goal. The gateway habit is not the hard thing. It is the doorway to the hard thing. And doorways are easy to walk through. You are not asking your reluctant brain to climb a mountain. You are asking it to take a single step toward the trailhead. What happens after that first step is almost never what resistance predicted. Identify your gateway habits. For each hard thing on your list, write down the single smallest physical action that would constitute beginning. Not the task, the opening move. Open the tab. Put on the shoes, dial the number, write 1 sentence, hold the weight. That one action is your gateway. Practice walking through it. The rest follows with surprising frequency. 4. Identity shift. Becoming someone who does hard things.
Every strategy we have discussed so far operates on the level of behavior, but behavior is downstream of something deeper: identity. The most durable and transformative change that any person can make is not a change in what they do, it is a change in who they believe they are. Because you will always, eventually, act in alignment with your self-image. You can force yourself to exercise for a week using willpower, but if you believe at the core that you are not an athletic person, the exercise will not last. The belief will win every time. It always does. This is the pivot point that separates people who change their behavior for a season from people who change their lives permanently. How identity forms and how to reform it. Your current identity was built by evidence. Every time you did something, your brain logged it. Every time you showed up for yourself, or failed to, the log was updated. Over years and decades, these logs accumulated into a story you tell yourself about who you are. You are not a morning person. You are not disciplined. You are not the kind of person who finishes things. The good news is that the same mechanism that built the old identity can build a new one. Your brain updates its story based on evidence, and evidence is simply the collection of choices you make, one at a time. You do not become someone who does hard things by deciding to become that person. You become that person by doing hard things, repeatedly, specifically, and then casting each completed act as a vote for the new identity. Not a big vote, not a life-changing vote, a single, quiet vote. I am someone who keeps commitments.
I am someone who does the work. I am someone who runs on Tuesday morning, even when it rains. Over time, these votes accumulate into an undeniable body of evidence. The story changes. And when the story changes, behavior stops requiring force. It becomes natural expression. The language you use about yourself. Pay close attention to how you describe yourself, because the language you use is not just a reflection of your identity, it actively shapes it. When you say, "I am trying to be more disciplined," you position discipline as something external you are reaching for. When you say, "I am a disciplined person," you claim it as existing fact, and your behavior begins to align with that claim. This is not positive thinking. This is not affirmation. This is neuroscience. The brain is a prediction machine. It works constantly to make your behavior consistent with its predictions about who you are. Change the prediction, and the behavior follows. Write your identity statement. Write a paragraph, in the present tense, describing the person you are choosing to become. Not who you will be someday, who you are now, as of this moment, in the process of becoming. Make it specific. Include the hard things you do. Include the qualities you are building. Read it every morning for the next 30 days, not as a wish, but as a reminder of established fact. Watch what it does to the choices you make throughout the day. 5. Managing discomfort, the skill nobody teaches. Here is something the self-help industry often gets wrong. It promises to make hard things easy. It promises to show you the shortcut, the hack, the system that removes all pain. But hard things, by definition, involve difficulty, and difficulty involves discomfort. No framework in the world eliminates that fact. What changes, what can change dramatically, is your relationship to discomfort. Whether discomfort is a signal to stop or a signal to continue, whether it is evidence of danger or evidence of growth. That relationship is a skill, and like all skills, it can be trained. The discomfort gradient. Think of discomfort as existing on a spectrum. At one end is mild friction, the small resistance of beginning any task. In the middle is genuine challenge, the sustained effort of doing something difficult for an extended period. At the other end is damage, genuine physical or psychological harm. Most people conflate all three, treating mild friction as if it were damage and fleeing it accordingly. Your job is to accurately categorize the discomfort you are feeling. Is this mild friction that requires only a brief push to break through? Is this genuine challenge that requires sustained focus and endurance but will not harm you?
Or is this actual damage? A signal your body or mind is giving you that this specific action, in this specific way, is causing real harm. The first two categories are not reasons to stop. They are the price of admission to anything worth doing. The third category deserves your attention. Learning to distinguish between these, with honesty, without self-deception in either direction, is one of the most important skills you will ever develop. Surfing the urge. Psychologists who study addiction recovery have developed a technique called urge surfing, observing a craving with curiosity rather than reacting to it. The same principle applies powerfully to the urge to quit when things get hard. When you feel the pull to stop, to close the document, to cut the workout short, to hang up before the hard conversation happens, try this instead. Observe the feeling without obeying it. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice its quality. Notice that it comes in waves. You do not fight the urge. You watch it rise, peak, and recede. And while you are watching, you keep going. With practice, this changes your nervous system's relationship to discomfort. You learn experientially, not intellectually, but experientially, that the feeling is not the fact, that you can feel resistance and act anyway, that the urge to quit and the decision to quit are two separate events, and the decision is always yours. Cold exposure as training for discomfort. One of the most practical methods for building a generalized tolerance for discomfort is deliberate cold exposure, ending your shower with 30 to 90 seconds of cold water. Not because cold showers are magical, but because they create a controlled, safe, daily experience of choosing to do something uncomfortable. The cold is objectively unpleasant. There is no way to trick yourself into enjoying it. You simply decide to do it anyway. The value of this practice is transfer. When you train daily in one domain to choose discomfort deliberately, your brain builds a stronger override mechanism that activates in other domains. You are quite literally strengthening your capacity to act against the pull of avoidance. The cold shower is not about temperature. It is about neurology. Build your discomfort practice. Choose one form of voluntary discomfort to practice daily this week. Cold water, a difficult conversation you have been postponing, 5 minutes of meditation when your mind wants to wander, a challenging workout set. The specific form matters less than the daily repetition. You are training a faculty, and like all training, it compounds. 6. Energy architecture. Protecting the fuel that powers everything. Every strategy in this book depends on one thing, that you have sufficient cognitive and physical energy to deploy it. This is a point that almost all productivity and motivation frameworks skip entirely. They hand you systems designed for a person operating at full capacity, without addressing the fact that most people are running on less than half their available fuel, chronically underslept, poorly nourished, sedentary, and chronically stressed. When your energy systems are depleted, the gap between knowing what you should do and doing it becomes a chasm. Willpower, discipline, and even sophisticated systems fail completely when the substrate they operate on is exhausted. Energy architecture is the practice of deliberately managing your physical, cognitive, and emotional resources so that you consistently have what you need to do difficult things. Sleep, the non-negotiable foundation. Nothing in your life costs you more than insufficient sleep, and almost nothing is as universally underestimated as a cost. Even modest sleep restriction, 6 hours a night for 2 weeks, produces cognitive impairment equivalent to 2 full nights without sleep. And critically, sleep-deprived people consistently rate themselves as less impaired than they actually are. You cannot accurately self-assess the damage you are doing to your capacity when you are sleep-deprived because the tool you are using to assess is itself impaired. Protecting 7 to 9 hours of sleep is not a luxury. It is the foundational act of someone who intends to do hard things consistently. Every other strategy in this book is built on that foundation. If the foundation is sand, the rest collapses. Set a consistent sleep schedule. Same bedtime, same wake time, every day, including weekends. Eliminate screens for at least 30 minutes before sleep. Keep the bedroom cool and dark. These are not suggestions from a wellness blog. They are conditions your biology requires to restore the cognitive function that doing hard things demands. Movement as a cognitive tool. Exercise is not primarily in this book because of what it does to your body. It is here because of what it does to your brain. Aerobic exercise increases levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the compound your brain uses to grow new neural connections. It reduces cortisol, the stress hormone that narrows your thinking and depletes executive function. It releases norepinephrine and dopamine in ways that directly improve focus, motivation, and emotional regulation. A 20-minute walk at a brisk pace before a difficult work session is not indulgence. It is preparation. It changes the neurochemical environment in which you will attempt to do hard things. People who exercise regularly are not disciplined despite their exercise. They are disciplined in part because of it. The cognitive load trap. Your working memory, the mental space in which you hold and manipulate information, has a finite capacity. Every open loop in your life, every unresolved decision, every nagging obligation consumes space in that working memory, whether or not you are actively thinking about it. This creates a cognitive load that silently drains the energy available for deliberate, effortful work. The solution is a regular mind-clearing practice. Once a week, Sunday evening works well for many people, write down every open loop you are carrying. Every unfinished task, unpaid bill, unresolved conflict, unmade decision. Get it out of your head and onto paper. Then, for each item, decide, do it now, schedule it, delegate it, or consciously decide not to do it and remove it from the list entirely. This practice alone can recover hours of effective cognitive energy per week. Audit your energy architecture. This week, honestly assess your sleep average, your weekly movement, and the cognitive load you are carrying. Identify the single biggest drain in each category. Not all three, just one each. Make one specific structural change to address it. Energy is not motivational. It is biological. Treating it as a serious resource to be managed is one of the most consequential decisions a person committed to doing hard things can make. 7. The productive failure framework. Making mistakes work for you. One of the most powerful sources of resistance to doing hard things is the fear of getting them wrong. This fear is so deeply embedded in most people that they cannot even articulate it clearly. It shows up as perfectionism, as paralysis, as the endless planning that never becomes doing. It shows up as the project that stays in the notebook because putting it into the world means it could fail. And failure, for most people, carries a weight far beyond the practical consequences. It feels like a referendum on their worth as a person. That conflation between the outcome of an attempt and the value of the person attempting is among the most destructive cognitive habits a human being can carry. And undoing it is not optional for anyone serious about doing difficult things consistently. What high performers actually believe about failure. Study the psychology of high performers across any field. Elite athletes, breakthrough scientists, innovative entrepreneurs, exceptional artists, and you find a consistent pattern in how they think about failure. They do not like it, they do not seek it, but they do not fear it either, and they recover from it faster than average. The reason is that high performers have a fundamentally different relationship with the outcome of their attempts. Where the average person asks, did I succeed or fail? The high performer asks, what did this attempt teach me? And how does that make my next attempt stronger? This is not a platitude. It is a literal cognitive reframe that changes the utility of every attempt. When failure contains information rather than judgment, you can use it. When it contains only judgment, you can only suffer it. One of these leads back into action. The other leads into avoidance. The productive failure protocol. After any attempt that does not go the way you wanted, any failed project, missed goal, poor performance, uncomfortable conversation, apply this 4-part protocol before you allow the event to become simply a memory of failure. First, separate what happened from what you made it mean. Describe the outcome in purely objective, observable terms. Not, "I failed," but "the presentation did not land with this audience and 3 people left before it ended." Precision prevents catastrophizing. Second, identify what specifically contributed to the outcome. Not character defects, behaviors and conditions. Did you prepare differently than you needed to? Did you misread the audience? Did you rush through the section that needed more time? These are actionable causes. Third, extract the specific, transferable lesson. What is the one thing, not 5 things, one thing that, if applied to your next attempt, would most improve the outcome? This forces you to distill experience into wisdom, rather than simply accumulating a catalog of painful memories. Fourth, set the very next action. Not a project, not a plan, the single next physical action that uses what you just learned. Write the revised section. Make the follow-up call. Practice the specific element that needs work. Action closes the loop and signals to your nervous system that failure is not a destination. It is a data point on the way to a destination. Pause. Building a high tolerance for imperfection. Deliberately practice releasing imperfect work. This runs counter to every instinct perfectionism has built into you, which is precisely why it is so valuable. Send the email that is 90% ready. Post the piece that is almost finished. Show the draft before it feels done. Not because quality does not matter, it does, but because the habit of waiting until something is perfect is the habit of never finishing anything. The world rewards completion. It always has. An imperfect project that exists and can be improved is infinitely more valuable than a perfect project that lives only in your imagination. 8. The accountability architecture. External systems for internal discipline. Human beings did not evolve to make and keep commitments in isolation. For the vast majority of our existence as a species, we lived in small, tight-knit groups where reputation and reciprocity were literally matters of survival. Breaking your word, failing to show up, not following through, these carried real social consequences that our ancestors could not afford. The result is that we are wired at a deep biological level to follow through on commitments we have made to others in ways that simply do not apply to commitments we have made only to ourselves. This is not a character flaw. It is biology. And like all biology, it can be used strategically.
The 4 levels of accountability. Keeping commitments to yourself. This is where most people operate, and it is the weakest form. You can negotiate with yourself endlessly. You can move the deadline, redefine success, or simply decide that the commitment no longer applies. Your internal negotiator is clever, persuasive, and available around the clock. The second level is social accountability, telling 1 or more people what you intend to do and when you intend to do it. The moment you speak your commitment out loud to another person, the stakes change. Your reputation is now involved. Your word is on the table. The social discomfort of reporting failure, even to one trusted friend, is a powerful motivator that runs independent of willpower. The third level is financial accountability, attaching a real monetary cost to failure. Platforms exist that allow you to commit money to a cause you would genuinely dislike, a political party you oppose, for example, if you fail to complete a stated goal by a stated deadline. The specificity of financial pain activates loss aversion, one of the most reliable forces in human psychology. The fourth level is structural accountability, choosing an environment where the people around you are doing the hard things you aspire to do. When your social context normalizes excellence, discipline, and follow-through, your brain recalibrates what is expected and possible. You are not swimming against the current is carrying you. Finding and using an accountability partner. An accountability partner is someone with whom you share specific goals, specific timelines, and specific check-in rhythms. The ideal partner is someone pursuing their own ambitious goals, someone who has skin in the game of growth, not just a willing ear. The structure matters.
Vague accountability produces vague results. Effective accountability is specific. You will complete Chapter 3 by Thursday at 8 p.m. You will make 15 sales calls between Monday and Friday. You will do 4 workouts this week and log each one. You check in on a specific day at a specific time. The partner does not need to understand your field. They need to ask you, on schedule, whether you did what you said you would do.
Mastermind groups and peer environments. Beyond a single partner, consider participating in a mastermind group, a small gathering of 4 to 8 people committed to a common standard of ambition and accountability. These groups, when well-structured, create a peer environment that systematically raises what every member considers normal. Hearing others pursue and complete hard things regularly recalibrates your sense of what is possible, expected, and achievable. You become the average of your environment, not just the 5 people you spend the most time with, but the 5 standards you are surrounded by most consistently. Engineering your environment with intention is not elitist, it is strategic. And it is one of the highest leverage investments you can make in your capacity for sustained high performance. Build your accountability structure. Identify one person, a friend, colleague, or peer, with whom you will share one specific commitment this week. Tell them exactly what you will do and by when. Schedule a check-in. Keep the commitment and report back. Notice how different that felt from a commitment you made only to yourself. Then build from there. 9. The long game. Sustaining discipline across weeks, months, and years. Everything we have discussed so far addresses a single battle. This chapter addresses the war. It is one thing to force yourself through a difficult task once. It is a profoundly different thing to maintain that capacity across years. To be someone who consistently does hard things not just in a motivated season, but through boredom, setbacks, uncertainty, grief, plateaus, and the grinding ordinary difficulty of life not going according to plan. Consistency across time is the real measure of discipline, and it requires different tools than those that power a single heroic effort. The danger of the inspiration cycle. Most people who pursue growth operate in cycles. A burst of inspiration drives aggressive action. The action runs into difficulty. Motivation drops, behavior collapses, guilt accumulates. A new source of inspiration arrives, and the cycle starts again. Each cycle ends roughly where the last one did. Progress is largely illusory because the discipline never had time to become structural. Breaking this cycle requires understanding what sustains action when inspiration has faded, which is virtually all of the time. Inspiration is weather. Systems are infrastructure. You do not build a city around weather. Process goals versus outcome goals. Outcome goals, lose 20 pounds, publish the book, make $100,000 in revenue, are important for direction. But they are terrible drivers of daily behavior, because daily behavior almost never produces visible progress toward an outcome goal. If you measure yourself every day by how close you are to the finish line, the answer is usually not very close. And that answer, repeated daily, degrades motivation faster than almost anything else. Process goals address this directly. A process goal is not a destination, it is a standard of conduct. Write 500 words a day, exercise 4 times a week, make 10 outreach calls before noon. Process goals are achievable every single day, regardless of outcome, and achieving them daily produces evidence, the most powerful force for sustaining motivation over the long run. The paradox is this: people who focus relentlessly on process goals almost always outperform those who focus primarily on outcomes, because the process, sustained over enough time, makes the outcome inevitable. But the reverse is not true. Fixating on outcomes without a reliable process produces anxiety, inconsistency, and ultimately failure. The minimal viable effort. On the hardest days, the days when the minimum viable effort is the smallest version of your discipline that still counts. For a runner, it might be, I will go outside and walk for 10 minutes, even if I run nothing. For a writer, it might be, I will open the document and write one paragraph. For an entrepreneur, it might be, I will make one call. The purpose of the minimum viable effort is not to produce maximum results on hard days. It is to maintain the identity and the habit through conditions that would otherwise break them entirely. The person who runs 10 minutes on their worst day and 5 miles on their best day is infinitely more resilient and will ultimately go further than the person who aims for 5 miles every day and collapses entirely when life makes that impossible. Scheduled rest as part of the system. Rest is not the absence of discipline. Rest is a component of it. High performance in any sustained domain, athletics, creative work, business, intellectual work, follows a pattern of stress and recovery. The stress is where the growth stimulus comes from. The recovery is where the actual growth happens. You cannot have one without the other and expect sustained performance. Schedule your rest intentionally, not the rest that happens when you collapse, the rest that you plan and protect as rigorously as your work. One full day per week where you are not pursuing output, vacations taken rather than skipped, evenings that belong to restoration rather than productivity. These are not indulgences. They are the recovery phase, without which the stress phase eventually destroys itself. Keep a simple daily record of whether you met your process goals, not a journal, a log, a single sheet, a notebook page, an app, something that makes your consistency visible. The visual representation of a streak, a row of consecutive days where you showed up, becomes itself a motivator. Missing a day breaks the chain, and the discomfort of breaking the chain is often stronger than the discomfort of doing the hard thing. When you do miss a day, and you will, apply one rule without exception. Never miss twice. One missed day is an event. 2 consecutive missed days is the beginning of a pattern. 3 is a new default. Never miss twice protects you from the compounding damage that follows from letting a single slip become a new identity.
10. Integration. Building your personal protocol. You have now covered 9 chapters of principles, frameworks, and practices. This chapter has one purpose: to help you convert all of it into a single, coherent personal protocol that you can implement starting today. A protocol is not a wish. It is not a vague intention. It is a specific set of behaviors scheduled into your life with structures and accountability in place to support them. It is the difference between deciding to change and actually changing. 1. Define your one hard thing. Most systems fail because they try to change everything at once. Sustainable change almost always begins with one thing. What is the single most important hard thing in your life right now? The one whose consistent execution would create the most positive leverage across everything else.
Not the easiest, not the most comfortable, the most important. For one person, it is writing daily. For another, it is a consistent fitness routine. For another, it is making the calls that build the business. For another, it is studying the skill that unlocks the next career level. Only you know what yours is. And if you are honest, you already know. You have known for a while. Write it down. Make it specific. Not get fit, but train for 45 minutes 4 mornings per week. Not work on my business, but spend 90 uninterrupted minutes every weekday morning on revenue-generating activities before checking email. Specificity is the difference between a dream and a plan. 2. Map the resistance. Now that you have named it, name what stands between you and it. Use what you learned in Chapter 1. Be precise. What form does your resistance take? Procrastination? Perfectionism? Rationalization? Busyness? Fear of a specific outcome? Name it without judgment, clearly and specifically. You cannot build a barrier against an enemy you have not located. 3. Build the forcing functions from Chapter 2 that directly address your identified resistance. If your resistance is late morning procrastination, time block the first 2 hours of every day and tell your accountability partner your start time. If your resistance is perfectionism, Give yourself a deadline that does not allow for endless revision. If your resistance is social isolation, doing things alone that require social pressure to sustain, find your group, your partner, your community. Write the specific forcing functions you will use, not conceptually, physically. Who will you tell? What will you schedule? What will you change in your environment? 4. Set your gateway habit and process goal. Define the gateway habit, the smallest possible action that initiates the hard thing, and commit to it daily. Then define your process goal, the minimum meaningful standard for a successful day, and track it. The gateway habit removes the activation energy of beginning. The process goal removes the ambiguity of whether you showed up. Together, they give you a clear start and a clear measure of success. 5. Schedule the energy practices. From Chapter 6, identify the 2 highest priority energy practices, the ones that will most directly improve your capacity to sustain the hard work. Put them in your calendar as non-negotiable appointments. Sleep protection, exercise schedule, weekly mind-clearing practice, whatever your honest assessment identified as most neglected and most impactful. Remember, the system runs on your energy. Failing to manage energy is the equivalent of building a race car and neglecting to fuel it. 6. Apply the productive failure protocol in advance. Commit now, before the inevitable setbacks, to applying the 4-part failure protocol from Chapter 7. Write the protocol somewhere you will see it when things go wrong. Prepare for imperfection the way a pilot prepares for turbulence, not by hoping it will not happen, but by knowing exactly what to do when it does. 7. Build your review rhythm. Schedule a weekly review, 30 minutes on the same day each week. During the review, assess your process goals. How many days did you meet the standard? What worked and what did not? What adjustment would make next week stronger? Do not use this time to judge yourself. Use it to iterate the system. A system that is regularly reviewed and adjusted is a living system. A system that is never reviewed fossilizes. The review is where the system learns. It is where you learn. And it compounds your improvement in ways that no single heroic week ever could. The 30-day launch. Commit to your protocol for 30 days without renegotiation. Not forever, 30 days. This is important. The first 30 days of any new discipline are when resistance is strongest, momentum is lowest, and the temptation to modify, pause, or abandon is highest. Setting a 30-day window removes that temptation by making the terms non-negotiable for a finite and manageable period. At the end of 30 days, review honestly. What worked exactly as designed? What needs adjustment? What have you learned about your resistance that you did not know when you started? Then, set the next 30 days, with whatever refinements the first round taught you. In 12 months of 30-day cycles, iterating and improving, the person you will be is genuinely unrecognizable from the person who pressed play on this audiobook. Conclusion. The person on the other side of the hard thing. There is a version of you on the other side of doing the hard thing. Not a perfect version, not a finished version, but a version that has more evidence. A version whose inner story has been updated by action, whose identity has been claimed rather than inherited, whose relationship with resistance has fundamentally changed. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is the logical, inevitable product of the consistent application of everything in this book. The distance between where you are and where that person stands is not measured in talent or luck or circumstance. It is measured in the number of times you chose to begin when beginning felt impossible, in the number of mornings you showed up when no one was watching and everything was difficult and the path forward was genuinely unclear. Hard things are not the obstacle to a good life. They are the architecture of it. The relationships worth having require difficult conversations. The careers worth building require sustained work through sustained uncertainty. The creative work worth making requires the courage to create badly until you create well.
The health worth having requires daily choices that run against the grain of comfort. There is no version of the life you want that does not run through difficulty. There never was. But here is what changes. The person you become in the process of doing hard things is someone who finds them less hard. Not easy, less hard. The threshold shifts. What required heroic effort last year requires ordinary effort this year. What seemed impossible 6 months ago now seems merely challenging. And what seems impossible today will seem, one day, like exactly the kind of thing you do.
Because it will be. Because it will be exactly the kind of thing you do. You have the framework. You have the tools. You have the understanding of resistance that most people spend a lifetime without. What remains is the one thing no book can give you: the choice to begin. Make it now. Make it again tomorrow, and the day after that. The war is won one morning at a time.